The worst feeling in the world is having your large 10-mana minion immediately killed before you can do anything with it. But what if death wasn't the final say? What if you could get those 10-mana minions out before your opponent has any answers to them? What if I told you could have all this and more? Resurrect Priest, or Big Priest, as it's more widely referred to as, aims to cheat out big minions with cards like Bards, then keeps them onto the field with new resurrection spells like Eternal Servitude. The deck wants to establish a board that is tricky for your opponent to deal with in the early turns, with large minions, and gain value off of cards that generate even more cards. All the cards in your deck work towards getting the sweet fatties out onto the field and controlling the board. Our core cards are our big fat minions, the cards that will help us control the boards, and finally, the cards that will help us cheat out those big minions. So let's start there. 2 Shadow Essences, 2 Eternal Servitudes, and a Barnes are the core cards of this deck. Both Barnes and Shadow Essence bring out copies of our minions that have very powerful effects. If you're able to establish something that generates you cards, or just interrupts your opponent's game plan, that is ideal. Getting Yashiraj from a Barnes that then pulls out an Obsidian statue puts you miles ahead of your opponent. And sure, the minion created from Barnes is a 1/1, and the 5/5 from Shadow Essence isn't hard to deal with, but that's where Eternal Servitude comes into play. Having your 1/1 Ysera die is a bummer, but then you can bring it back the next turn and have it at full attack and health. This is why the deck has the potential to blow out games. Ysera, Yashiraj, the Lich King, and 2 Obsidian statues are the core minions that you want to be pulling out. 3 out of 5 of these minions have taunt, which can stop early game pressure. And then if you can resurrect them the following turn, it gets even better. Obsidian statue is a real powerhouse in this deck and can swing games out of nowhere. Having lifesteal is a valuable tool if you're behind, while the removal ability puts your opponent in a tough spot. Both the Lich King and Ysera generate you more cards that act as removal or additional threats to your opponent. Yashiraj in an early turn is pretty self-explanatory, but made even better given the fact that all of his targets are high value as well. The rest of the deck is pretty standard removal and controlling tools for Priest. 2 pint-sized potions, 2 Potion of Madnesses, 2 Shadow Visions, 2 Power Word Pains, 2 Power Word Deaths, 2 Power Word Horrors, 2 Dragonfire Potions, and Shadow Reaper Anduin are the most common control cards across all versions of this deck. You kill small stuff, you kill big stuff. Take control of small stuff to kill more small stuff. Make big stuff into small stuff to kill that small stuff. You get the idea. The one card that isn't a strict removal card is the Shadow Visions. Use this to find removal pieces if you need it, or you can use it to find the Shadow Essences or Eternal Servitudes in the early game. Sometimes switching to your Death Knight and using the cheap removal spells to gain more damage off your hero power can also win you games. So far I've talked about 25 cards, and these are the cards that should be considered must-includes in this deck. The other 5 cards are flex cards. Depending on who's running the deck and what they're fighting against, will determine what the extra 5 slots will go to. Silence is often a choice for some to help get rid of nasty early game effects, or to silence the creature off of Barnes to make it bigger. Holy Smite is more removal, while Greater Healing Potion could put you just out of range of a hunter trying to top deck. Mind Vision and Thought Steal gives you more cards, while Free from Amber gives you an additional creature. Mass Dispel can work well against tempo rogues, while Holy Nova and Spirit Lash can deal with decks that like to go wide. Determine what your weaknesses are and which decks that you're seeing a lot of at your rank, and feel open to moving these cards accordingly. Now that we're done talking about the list, let's talk about what you should mulligan for. The short answer is Barnes. Barnes by far has the highest win rate when it's in your starting hand. Following that is Shadow Essence and Eternal Servitude. Because these are the cards that bring out your big guys, it makes sense that these guys are the top of the list of what you should mulligan for. You want to be playing these guys early so you can get those big splashy effects that are hard for your opponent to deal with. But watch out, because they still are expensive cards. At 4 mana and 6 mana, you're going to be waiting a while to play these. Shadow Word Pain, Shadow Word Horror, and Potion of Madness are all top of the list of what you should keep, because they get rid of early game pressure. Shadow Visions is also on the top of your list, because you can use this to search for Eternal Servitude or Shadow Essence if you didn't get either of those in your starting hand, or you can use it to search for removal tools if you didn't get those either. Shadow Visions is a real all-star in this deck because it can fix your inconsistencies and get more copies of your resurrection effects. Some people say you just need a high roll with this deck to win, and there's not much skill to this deck. That's simultaneously true and very untrue. Understanding what removal works best in any given scenario is key. Being able to know when to play your Eternal Servitude or Shadow Essence also makes a huge difference. Also, knowing when to give up healing and switch to your Death Knight also gives you a huge edge. So while luck may seem like it plays a big role in this deck, it's not much more than any other deck in the game. The deck isn't very popular anymore, and is often seen at the bottom of Tier 2 or at the top of Tier 3 on most of the popular meta ranks. But this by far doesn't mean it's a bad deck, just that it has some bad matchups at the moment. Many of the most popular decks right now, like Mid-Range Hunter at lower ranks and Tempo Rogue, will hold your feet to the fire with early game pressure. On the other hand, Raza Priest, Zoolock, and Control Warlock all have a hard time with your pressure. Two wild cards here are Jade Druid and Token Shaman. Both these decks are extremely popular right now in the meta, while being about even with this deck. While this deck is extremely fun on ladder, in tournaments it fails to counter any one archetype. The deck is also vulnerable to less popular decks like Warlock Paladin and Exodia Mage, which do see tournament play. You're playing this deck because it is fun, not because it's going to win you a championship. The deck is expensive and will set you back around 10,000 dust. That's because you need 5 legendaries, 2 epics, 2 rares, just for the shell, and that's not including all the premium removal spells. Sadly, there isn't really a budget build for this deck. You just need these big impactful cards to be pulled for this deck to work. You just can't really substitute Ysera for Alexstrasza, because they do completely different things. You want Ysera's and the Lich King's end of turn effects to gain you value. You can't really get the same value if you pull a card with a really powerful battle cry. Karen might be the closest card that you can substitute, but again, that's another legendary. You kind of need legendaries for this deck to work. So if you're a free-to-play player, sorry, this might not be the deck for you. There are some different deck variants that we could look at. Some versions of the deck gear it more towards spell damage, with cards like Malygos and Prophet Velen, with a pair of Mind Blast and Holy Smites. So if you want to try a different version of this deck, you might want to give that a try. While not a cheaper version of the deck, it is definitely a fun one to try out. Big Priest wants you to live on the edge, making big, bold plays, while enjoying the frustration of your opponent as he tries to destroy an 8/8 creature on turn 5. Sit back and get ready to embrace your rage. Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you for watching my video. If you want to see more deck techs, I did one a few weeks ago on Exodia Mage. You can click right there to see that. I'm having a lot of fun making these deck techs, so if you want to see more, please subscribe. And leave me a comment and let me know of any decks that you want me to look at. Once again, thanks for watching.